The North Atlantic, winter, 1940. Imagine the water temperature is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Salt water freezes at 28 degrees. The only reason the ocean isn't solid ice is the constant, violent churning of the waves. In the darkness, a convoy of 40 merchant ships is trying to stay together. These aren't warships. They are rusty, slow, heavy cargo steamers. They are carrying wheat from Canada, steel from Pennsylvania, aviation fuel from Texas. They are the only thing keeping Great Britain alive. Suddenly, a white streak of bubbles cuts through the black water. There is no warning, just a dull, wet thud. Then, an explosion that turns the night into day. The tanker at the rear of the column has been hit. Thousands of gallons of aviation fuel ignite instantly. The ocean itself catches fire. For the sailors on the other ships, there is a terrible choice. If they stop to help the survivors, they become sitting ducks for the U-boat that is waiting in the darkness. So they keep moving. They steam ahead into the freezing night, leaving the burning tanker behind, leaving the men in the water behind. This scene didn't happen once. It didn't happen twice. In 1940, it was happening every single night. This was the Tonnage War, and the Allies were losing it. To understand why, you have to look at the war through the eyes of one man, Karl Dönitz, the commander of the German U-boat fleet. Dönitz wasn't interested in capturing territory. He wasn't interested in glory. He was a cold, calculating mathematician of death. He looked at the war as a simple ledger sheet. On one side, the amount of shipping tonnage Great Britain needed to survive, food, ore, oil, weapons. On the other side, the amount of tonnage his submarines could send to the bottom of the ocean. Dönitz did the math. He calculated that if his U-boats could sink 700,000 tons of shipping per month, Britain would starve. Not metaphorically, literally. The factories would stop making Spitfires. The bakeries would run out of flour. The power plants would run out of coal. Churchill would be forced to surrender. Not because his army was defeated on the battlefield, but because his country had simply ceased to function. In 1940, Dönitz was terrifyingly close to that number. His wolf packs, groups of submarines coordinating their attacks by radio, were slaughtering convoys. In a single month, they sank nearly 300,000 tons, then 400,000. For Winston Churchill, sitting in his bunker in London, the reports coming across his desk were a nightmare. He later wrote, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." Because Churchill knew the other side of the equation. And the other side was even worse. It takes 12 months to build a merchant ship. It takes skilled labor. It takes dry docks. It takes thousands of tons of steel. Britain's shipyards were full. They were building battleships and aircraft carriers to fight the German Navy. They were repairing the ships that managed to limp home with torpedo damage. They simply could not build merchant ships fast enough to replace the ones going down. The math was undeniable. The line on the graph representing ships sunk was going up vertically. The line representing ships built was flat. When those two lines crossed, the war was over. Britain needed a miracle. They needed ships, hundreds of them, and they needed them immediately. But they had no place to build them. So they looked west. In September 1940, a desperate group of men boarded an ocean liner in Liverpool. They were the British Merchant Shipbuilding Mission. They carried with them a set of blueprints for a ship. It wasn't a pretty ship. It was a tramp steamer. Slow, ugly, basic. It was designed to be the pickup truck of the ocean. A simple design that had been around for decades. The Sunderland Tramp. Their mission was to take these blueprints to the United States and convince the Americans to build it for them. But there was a problem. The United States wasn't in the war yet, and the American shipbuilding industry was, effectively, dead. After the First World War, America had stopped building merchant ships. The shipyards had closed. The skilled workers had retired. The slipways were overgrown with weeds. When the British delegation arrived in New York, they didn't find a mighty industrial giant ready to spring into action. They found a country that had forgotten how to build ships. The British delegation went to the established giants of American industry first. They went to Bethlehem Steel. They went to United States Steel. They went to the Newport News Shipbuilding Company. And everywhere they went, the answer was the same: no. The existing shipyards were already booked solid building warships for the U.S. Navy. They had no empty slipways. They had no spare workers. And frankly, they weren't interested in building the British tramp steamer. It was a crude design. It relied on old-fashioned steam engines because Britain didn't have the capacity to build modern diesel turbines. It was ugly. It was cheap. For the proud master shipbuilders of the East Coast, building these ships was beneath them. The British were desperate. They were running out of time. They had the money, they had the blueprints, but they couldn't find anyone willing to take the job. And then they met Henry Kaiser. If you looked up unqualified in the dictionary in 1940, you might have found a picture of Henry Kaiser standing next to a ship. Kaiser had never built a ship. He had never run a shipyard. He didn't know a bulkhead from a bilge pump. Henry Kaiser was a construction man, a dirt mover. He had made his fortune paving highways in Cuba and building levees on the Mississippi. But his crowning achievement was the Hoover Dam. Kaiser was part of the Six Companies, a consortium of construction firms that had tamed the Colorado River. They had poured millions of tons of concrete in the middle of the desert. They had built entire cities for their workers from scratch. They understood logistics, they understood scale, and they understood speed. When Kaiser heard the British were looking for someone to build ships, he didn't hesitate. He barged into the meeting with the energy of a steam locomotive. He told the British delegation that he would build their ships. The British were skeptical. They asked him, "Where is your shipyard, Mr. Kaiser?" Kaiser smiled. He said, "I don't have one yet, but I have a plan." He didn't take them to a dry dock. He took them to a mudflat in Richmond, California. It was a swamp. There was nothing there but birds and water. He pointed to the mud and said, "We'll build the yard here, and we'll build the ships at the same time." To the traditional shipbuilders, this was insanity. You can't learn to build ocean-going vessels overnight. It takes generations of institutional knowledge. But Kaiser looked at a ship differently. He didn't see a work of art. He didn't see a complex machine. He looked at the blueprints for the British tramp steamer, and he saw a floating building. To him, a ship was just steel and welding rod. It was a structure. And if you could pour concrete for a dam 24 hours a day, why couldn't you pour steel into the shape of a hull 24 hours a day? He partnered with another construction firm, Todd Shipyards, and signed a contract with the British for 60 ships. But Kaiser had bigger ambitions. He knew the United States was inevitably going to enter the war, and he knew America would need thousands of ships, not 60. He took the British design to Washington, D.C. He presented it to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. FDR looked at the drawings. He saw the flat sides, the blunt bow, the smokestack sticking straight up out of the middle like a stovepipe. The president was a former assistant secretary of the Navy. He loved ships. He loved graceful lines and speed. He looked at Kaiser's proposal and said, "I think this ship will do us very well. She's a real ugly duckling." The press picked up the quote, "the ugly duckling." It wasn't a compliment. Critics called them seagoing trucks. They said they were too slow. With a top speed of only 11 knots, they couldn't outrun a surfaced U-boat. They said they were sitting ducks. But the government needed tonnage. They didn't need Ferraris. They needed dump trucks. To sell the program to the American public, they needed a rebrand. Ugly Duckling wasn't going to inspire the nation. So, they announced a new name, September 27, 1941. The first of these new ships was ready to launch. FDR proclaimed that these ships would bring liberty to Europe, and so, the Liberty ship was born. But giving it a patriotic name didn't solve the fundamental problem. The British design required months of labor. It relied on riveting, a slow, painstaking process that required highly skilled crews. Kaiser looked at the blueprints and realized something terrifying. If they built these ships the traditional way, they would lose the war. He needed to fundamentally change the way human beings put metal together. He needed an industrial revolution. To understand the magnitude of what Kaiser did, you first have to understand how a ship was built for the previous 50 years. You have to understand the rivet. A rivet is essentially a metal pin used to hold two steel plates together, but you don't just push it in. Riveting was a brutal physical ballet that required a four-man team. First, you had the heater. He stood at a small coal forge, cooking the steel rivets until they were white hot, nearly 2,000 degrees. Then, he would pick up the glowing rivet with tongs and throw it, literally throw a piece of molten metal through the air to the catcher. The catcher stood 50 feet away, often balancing on a narrow scaffolding. He caught the flying rivet in a metal cone. He would pick it out and jam it into the hole in the steel plates. Then came the holder-on. He braced a heavy bar against the back of the rivet to keep it in place. Finally, the riveter, the star of the show, would attack the front of the pin with a pneumatic hammer. It sounded like a machine gun. Bam, 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 bam. He would hammer the hot metal until it mushroomed out, clamping the two plates together. They had to do this perfectly, every single time. A single Liberty ship required 600,000 rivets. It was slow, it was deafeningly loud, and most importantly, it required skill. A master riveter took years to train. You couldn't just grab a farm boy from Kansas or a housewife from Oregon and teach them to rivet overnight. Kaiser looked at this process and said, "Get rid of it." He replaced the rivet with the weld. Welding wasn't new, but it had never been used on this scale for merchant ships. Traditionalists hated it. They didn't trust a ship that wasn't stitched together with iron pins. But welding changed the physics of production. Instead of a four-man team passing hot metal, you needed one person with an electric torch. Instead of overlapping the steel plates, which added weight and drag, you could butt them up against each other and fuse them directly. A welded ship was lighter, it was faster, and it used less steel. But the real advantage was human. You couldn't train a master riveter in a month, but you could train a competent welder in a few weeks. This decision unlocked the American workforce. It meant that anyone could build a ship. But Kaiser didn't stop at welding. He fundamentally reimagined what a shipyard was. In a traditional yard, the ship is built from the keel up in one spot. The workers swarm over the hull like ants, but they are constantly waiting on each other. The plumbers can't work until the steel guys are done. The electricians wait for the carpenters. It's a bottleneck. Kaiser decided to take the ship apart. He introduced prefabrication. Instead of building the ship on the slipway, he built it in pieces, huge pieces. He set up assembly plants miles away from the water. There, workers built entire sections of the ship. They built the bow. They built the stern. They built the deck house. They built them upside down. Why? Because welding overhead is hard. Hot sparks fall into your face. Gravity fights you. By flipping a deckhouse upside down, the welders could work downhand. It was faster, easier, and the welds were stronger. Once a 60-ton section was finished, massive cranes would lift it onto a flatbed rail car. It would travel across the yard to the slipway. Then, giant cranes would lift the entire section into the air and lower it onto the keel. It was like building with massive Lego blocks. The workers on the slipway didn't have to build the ship. They just had to weld the big pieces together. This transformed the shipyard from a construction site into a factory. At the Richmond yards in California, raw steel came in one end and finished ships floated out the other. It was a continuous flow of metal. Kaiser also introduced a secret weapon, a machine that the workers called the sewing machine for steel, the union melt. This was an automated welding machine. It didn't look like much, a small tractor that crawled along the steel seams on a track, but underneath it was revolutionary. It used a process called submerged arc welding. A human welder has to stop every minute to change their electrode. They get tired. Their hand shakes. The union melt never got tired. It poured a granular flux over the wire, shielding the arc from the air. It could weld a seam in one pass that would take a human 20 passes. It was 10 times faster than a human hand, and 20 times faster than a rivet gang. With prefabrication and automated welding, the time to build a ship began to plummet. The British had said it would take 6 months to build a Liberty ship. Kaiser said he could do it in less, but to keep this massive industrial machine running, he needed fuel. Not oil or coal, he needed people. And that was about to become the biggest problem of the war. By 1942, the United States faced a paradox. To fight a global war, the military needed millions of men. The draft boards were sweeping through towns across America, taking every able-bodied man between the ages of 18 and 35. But to build the ships to carry those men, Henry Kaiser needed an army of his own. He needed hundreds of thousands of workers. But the traditional labor pool, young, strong men, was gone. They were in boot camp. They were in the Pacific. They were in North Africa. So Kaiser did something radical. He threw out the rulebook on who could be a shipbuilder. He launched a massive recruiting campaign. He sent trains across the country with loudspeakers blasting patriotic music. He plastered posters in post offices from the Dust Bowl to the Deep South. His message was simple. If you can walk, you can work. He hired the elderly. He hired the disabled. He hired people who had never held a wrench in their lives. But most importantly, he hired women. Before 1942, the idea of a woman working in a shipyard was unthinkable. A shipyard was a dangerous, dirty, masculine world. It was heavy steel and cursing and sweat. But the Rosie the Riveter poster wasn't just propaganda. It was a necessity. Kaiser set up childcare centers right at the shipyard gates, the first of their kind in the world. He opened grocery stores inside the yard so women could shop after their shift, and the women came. They were housewives, waitresses, and school teachers. They traded their dresses for heavy leather dungarees and steel-toed boots. They tied bandanas around their heads, not for fashion, but to keep the sparks from setting their hair on fire. They became Wendy the Welders, and they were good at it. Supervisors quickly realized that women often made better welders than men. They had steadier hands. They had more patience for the fine detail work. They could squeeze into the tight double-bottom hulls where a large man couldn't fit. But it wasn't just a gender revolution. It was a migration. Trains arrived in Oakland and Portland every day, packed with African-American families leaving the Jim Crow South. They were chasing the promise of high wages and a new life in the West. For many, the shipyards offered the first steady paycheck they had ever seen. But bringing hundreds of thousands of people to the shipyards created a logistical nightmare. Where do they sleep? Richmond, California, was a sleepy town of 20,000 people. Almost overnight, it swelled to over 100,000. People were sleeping in movie theaters. They were sleeping in their cars. They were renting hot beds, renting a mattress for 8 hours while another worker was at the yard. Kaiser's solution was typical Kaiser. If the city doesn't exist, build it. In Oregon, he built Vanport. It was the second largest city in the state, and it hadn't existed a year earlier. It was a sprawling complex of temporary wooden apartments, built on a floodplain between the river and the shipyard. It had its own schools, its own hospital, its own police force. It was a city built for one purpose: speed. The workers lived in Vanport, took a specialized bus to the yard, built ships for 8 hours, and went home. It was an industrial ecosystem designed to squeeze every ounce of productivity out of the human body, and it worked. The production times kept dropping. 200 days, 100 days, 60 days. The yards were launching ships so fast the water in the harbor never settled. But in this rush for speed, in this desperate sprint to beat the U-boats, corners were being cut. You had a workforce that had never built ships before. You had a new technology, welding, that was still being perfected. And you had managers pushing for numbers above all else. The steel was flowing, the ships were floating, but deep inside the metal structure of the Liberty ships, invisible forces were building up, stresses that no one understood. And on a cold night in January 1943, the physics caught up with them. Portland, Oregon, January 16th, 1943. The SS Schenectady was the pride of the Kaiser fleet. It was the first tanker built at the new Swan Island shipyard. It had just completed its sea trials. It was brand new. It was sitting quietly at the fitting out dock in calm water. It was 11 o'clock at night. The air was cold. Suddenly, a sound like a cannon shot echoed across the river. It was loud enough to wake people sleeping a mile away. Workers on the night shift looked up in horror. Right before their eyes, the massive steel deck of the tanker tore open. The crack started on one side and raced across the ship at the speed of sound. It sheared through the thick steel plating like a zipper opening a jacket. The ship jackknifed. The bow and stern rose out of the water, and the middle settled into the river mud. In seconds, a brand new $16 million warship had snapped in half, without a single torpedo being fired, without a single wave hitting it. It had destroyed itself while tied to the dock. The reaction was immediate panic. The FBI rushed to the scene. They suspected sabotage. German agents were the logical explanation. How else could a steel ship just break in two? But then, reports started coming in from the North Atlantic. Other Liberty ships were cracking. Some had developed massive fractures in their decks. Others had simply vanished without a distress call. The newspapers got hold of the story. They called them Kaiser's coffins. They claimed the ships were being built too fast. They blamed the amateur welders. They blamed the women. The entire Liberty ship program, the only hope for winning the war, was on the verge of being canceled. The government needed answers, and they found them in an unlikely place. Not in a shipyard, but in a laboratory at Cambridge University in England. Dr. Constance Tipper was not a shipbuilder. She was a crystallographer. She studied the internal structure of crystals and metals. She was one of the few women in her field, and she was brilliant. When pieces of the fractured steel were sent to her lab, she did something the male engineers hadn't thought to do. She tested the steel at different temperatures. She discovered a phenomenon that is now famous in engineering textbooks, the ductile to brittle transition. Here is the science. Normally, steel is ductile. If you pull on it, It stretches like taffy before it breaks. It gives you warning. It absorbs energy. But Tipper discovered that the specific type of low-grade steel used in Liberty ships had a fatal flaw. When the temperature dropped below a certain point, around freezing, the molecular structure of the steel effectively changed. It stopped being like taffy, and it started acting like glass. It became brittle. In the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, the Liberty ships were essentially sailing inside glass hulls, but that was only half the problem. The other half was the welding itself. In the old riveted ships, every steel plate was separate. If a crack started in one plate, it would run to the edge of that plate and stop. The crack couldn't jump the gap to the next plate. A riveted ship might leak, but it wouldn't break in two. But a welded Liberty ship was different. It was a monolithic structure. It was effectively one single continuous piece of steel from bow to stern. If a crack started, there was nothing to stop it, and cracks always start at a stress riser, a sharp corner, a hatch opening, or a tiny microscopic flaw in a weld. Tipper explained that a tiny bubble in a weld, invisible to the naked eye, acted like the score line on a pane of glass. When the ship hit a cold wave, the stress concentrated on that tiny bubble. The brittle steel couldn't stretch to absorb the energy, so it snapped, and once the crack started, the energy released drove it through the entire hull in a fraction of a second. The Schenectady hadn't been sabotaged by Nazis. It had been sabotaged by physics. The solution wasn't to stop building ships. It was to engineer a fix. They couldn't change the steel. They didn't have time to upgrade the steel mills. And they couldn't stop welding. So they installed crack arresters. They riveted heavy steel straps along the deck and hull. If a crack started running through the weld, it would hit the riveted strap and stop. It was a band-aid, but it worked. The ships stopped breaking in half. With the engineering crisis solved, Kaiser could turn his attention back to the one thing that mattered more than anything else: speed. He wanted to show the world just how fast American industry could move. He wanted a stunt. And he was about to organize the greatest industrial race in history. By late 1942, the shipyards were no longer just building ships. They were competing. It was a friendly but fierce rivalry. Up in Oregon, Kaiser's son, Edgar, was running the Oregon shipyard. Down in California, Clay Bedford was running the Richmond yards. They started trading records like boxers trading punches. Oregon built a ship in 10 days. Richmond built one in 8. But in November 1942, Clay Bedford decided to end the argument once and for all. He wanted to build a Liberty ship in less than 5 days. The ship was the SS Robert E. Peary. The planning for this stunt was military in its precision. They weren't just going to build a ship. They were going to perform a ballet with 10,000 tons of steel. Every piece was pre-positioned. Every crane movement was calculated. Every welder knew exactly where to stand at exactly what minute. The clock started at 1 minute past midnight on Sunday, November 8th. The keel blocks were ready. As soon as the whistle blew, the massive cranes lowered the bottom shell plates. Within minutes, the welders descended. Normally, you lay the keel and wait. Not this time. By 6 a.m., the entire bottom of the ship was finished. By noon on the first day, the bulkheads, the internal walls, were flying into place. The speed was disorienting. If you went to get a cup of coffee and came back, the ship looked different. By midnight on Sunday, 24 hours in, the entire hull structure was taking shape. On Monday, the heavy lifting began. The engine of a Liberty ship is a massive, 3-story tall steam engine weighing 135 tons. Usually, installing it takes days of careful alignment. On the Peary, they lowered it into the ship while the hull was still hot from the welding torches. They bolted it down, connected the shaft, and moved on. On Tuesday, day 3, the chaos reached its peak. The deckhouse went on. This was the structure where the crew lived and steered the ship. It had been built complete on the ground, with the plumbing installed, the electrical wiring done, even the mirrors hanging in the bathrooms. They lifted the entire house in 4 sections and welded it to the deck. While the welders were sealing the roof, painters were already working on the hull below them. They painted the ship while it was being built. The painters had to move fast because the steel was literally getting hot from the welding on the other side. By Wednesday night, day 4, they were outfitting the ship. They were loading the lifeboats. They were filling the galley with pots and pans. They were making the beds in the captain's quarters. On Thursday morning, November 12th, a crowd gathered at the Richmond yard. At 3:30 p.m., the blocks were knocked away. Champagne smashed against the bow, and the SS Robert E. Peary slid into the water. The stopwatch stopped. 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes, from a pile of steel plates to a floating ship. It was a publicity stunt, yes, but it was a stunt that sent a shockwave around the world. When the news reached Berlin, it was devastating. Imagine being a German U-boat commander. You risk your life to penetrate a convoy. You dodge destroyers, you fire your torpedoes, you sink a ship, and then you find out that the Americans just replaced that ship in 4 days. It broke the psychological back of the Axis powers. They realized they weren't just fighting an army. They were fighting a manufacturing monster that they could not kill. And the Peary wasn't a dummy ship. It wasn't a prop. It sailed to the Pacific. It carried cargo. It survived the war. After the Peary, the frantic pace settled down. Kaiser realized that building ships in 4 days was inefficient. It burned out the workers and disrupted the supply chain. The average settled at around 42 days. Still a miracle compared to the 6 months the British had predicted. But by 1943, the war was changing. The Liberty ship had done its job. It had held the line. But now, the Allies were going on the offensive. They needed faster ships. They needed ships that could keep up with the fast aircraft carrier task forces in the Pacific. The era of the ugly duckling was ending. It was time for the Victory ship. The Liberty ship had saved Britain. It had bought the Allies time. But it had a fatal flaw that no amount of welding speed could fix. It was slow, painfully slow. A fully loaded Liberty ship chugged along at 11 knots. In rough seas, that could drop to 6 or 7. A surfaced German U-boat could do 17 knots. This meant that a Liberty ship was always prey. It couldn't run. It could only hide in the center of a convoy and pray that the destroyers on the perimeter saw the submarine before the torpedo was fired. The reason for this lack of speed wasn't the hull design, it was the engine. When the British brought their blueprints in 1940, they specified a triple expansion steam engine. This was technology from the Titanic era. It was a massive cast iron beast. Steam entered a high-pressure cylinder, pushed a piston, then moved to a medium cylinder, pushed another piston, and finally to a low-pressure cylinder. It was reliable. It was rugged. You could fix it with a sledgehammer. But it was ancient. The United States Navy didn't use piston engines anymore. They used steam turbines. A turbine is like a jet engine powered by steam. High-pressure steam blasts through fan blades, spinning a shaft at thousands of revolutions per minute. It is smooth, quiet, and incredibly powerful. But there was a catch. To use a turbine on a ship, you need reduction gears. You have to take that shaft spinning at 5,000 RPM and gear it down to 90 RPM to turn the propeller. Cutting those gears requires jeweled precision. If the teeth are off by a fraction of a human hair, the gears will scream like a banshee and tear themselves apart. In 1941, The US only had a handful of factories capable of cutting these gears, and every single one of them was booked making engines for Navy destroyers. So, the Liberty ships got the old piston engines. They were the pickup trucks, because that's the only engine we could mass produce. But by 1943, the industrial miracle had spread beyond the shipyards. Westinghouse and General Electric had built massive new factories. They had trained thousands of machinists. The shortage of reduction gears was over. It was time to upgrade the fleet. Enter the Victory ship. If the Liberty was a pickup truck, the Victory was a freight train. It was slightly longer and wider, but the big difference was under the hood. Instead of the clanking piston engine, it had a 6,000 horsepower steam turbine, high-pressure steam, modern boilers. The result? 15 to 17 knots. That sounds like a small difference, but in naval warfare, it is everything. 15 knots meant a Victory ship could outrun a submerged U-boat. It meant they didn't always need to travel in slow convoys. They could sail independently. It cut the travel time across the Atlantic by days. And in logistics, time is tonnage. A faster ship can make more trips per year. One Victory ship could deliver almost twice as much cargo in a year as a Liberty ship, simply because it spent less time at sea. But switching from Liberty to Victory presented a massive logistical headache for Henry Kaiser and the Maritime Commission. Imagine a car factory running at full speed, producing a car every 40 seconds. Now, tell the manager he has to switch to a completely new model with a different engine, different hull shape, and different parts. Usually, you would shut the factory down for 6 months to retool. But there was a war on. They couldn't stop building ships for a single day. So, they had to perform an industrial transplant while the patient was still awake. They began phasing in the Victory ships, slipway by slipway. As the last Liberty ship was launched from slipway number 1, the keel for the first Victory ship was already being laid. The supply chain had to synchronize perfectly. The train cars carrying the old piston engines had to stop arriving, and the cars carrying the new turbines had to start arriving, exactly on schedule. If they messed up, 10,000 workers would be standing around with nothing to bolt together, but they didn't mess up. The first Victory ship, the SS United Victory, was launched in early 1944. It was a symbol of how the war had changed. The Liberty was a desperate defensive weapon, built just to keep Britain from starving. The Victory was an offensive weapon. It had range, it had speed, it had stronger decks to carry heavy tanks and locomotives. It was built for the invasion of Europe. And the arrival of these faster ships coincided with the turning of the tide in the Atlantic. For 3 years, the U-boats had hunted freely. But in the spring of 1943, the hunters became the hunted. The sheer volume of American production finally overwhelmed the German capacity to destroy it, and the math, Admiral Dönitz's cruel math, began to break down. Spring 1943, the Atlantic Ocean. For 3 years, the German U-boat fleet had enjoyed what their crews called the happy time. They had roamed the ocean almost fast and loose, picking off isolated ships and terrorizing convoys. Admiral Dönitz's math was holding up. He was sinking ships faster than the Allies could replace them. But in May 1943, the equation suddenly and violently flipped. Historians call it Black May. It wasn't just one thing that changed, it was everything changing at once. First, the technology. The Allies closed the air gap, the terrifying stretch of ocean in the mid-Atlantic where land-based bombers couldn't reach. They introduced escort carriers. These were small, makeshift aircraft carriers, often built on the hulls of merchant ships that could travel with the convoys. Suddenly, a U-boat commander surfacing to recharge his batteries wasn't safe anywhere. He would look up and see a Grumman Avenger diving at him with depth charges. Second, the intelligence. The codebreakers at Bletchley Park had cracked the German naval Enigma code. They knew where the wolf packs were waiting. They steered the convoys around them. But the biggest factor, the sledgehammer that finally broke the back of the U-boat threat, was simply the number of targets. Henry Kaiser's industrial machine was now running at full throttle. In 1941, American shipyards produced about 1 million tons of shipping. In 1943, they produced 19 million tons. Think about that number. 19 million tons. It was a tsunami of steel. Every time a U-boat sank a ship, the Americans launched 3 more to replace it. Dönitz watched his graphs with growing horror. The line representing Allied construction didn't just cross the ship's sunk line. It skyrocketed past it. But it was the cost of doing business that finally broke the German spirit. In May 1943 alone, the Allies didn't just defend their ships. They hunted the hunters. In that single month, the Germans lost 41 U-boats, 41 submarines. That is a quarter of their entire operational fleet. Gone in 30 days. Among the dead was Dönitz's own son, Peter. On May 24, 1943, Admiral Dönitz sent a radio message to his commanders. It was an admission of defeat. "We have lost the Battle of the Atlantic," he effectively conceded. He ordered his boats to withdraw from the North Atlantic convoy routes. The Tonnage War was over. The industrial might of the United States had won. But winning the war against the submarines was only the first step. Now the Allies had thousands of Liberty ships. They had control of the ocean. The question changed from how do we survive to how do we use this massive fleet to crush the Axis? These ships weren't just empty boxes. They were floating warehouses of war, and sailing them required a special breed of sailor. We talk a lot about the soldiers who stormed the beaches and the pilots who flew the bombers, but we rarely talk about the men who sailed the Liberty ships. The United States Merchant Marine. They were civilians. They weren't in the Navy. They didn't wear uniforms. They could quit their job at the end of a voyage if they wanted to, but they didn't quit, and they paid a higher price than almost anyone else. Statistically, the Merchant Marine had a higher casualty rate than the Army or the Navy. 1 in every 26 merchant mariners died in the war. They died in freezing water. They died in burning oil. They died trapped in engine rooms as their ships went down. And unlike the Navy sailors, they had no guns to fight back with. Or at least, most of them didn't. But there is one story that proves the Liberty ship wasn't just a helpless victim. It is the story of the SS Stephen Hopkins, and it is the only time in history that a slow, ugly cargo ship fought a German warship to the death, and won. September 27, 1942, the South Atlantic. The SS Stephen Hopkins was sailing alone, en route from Cape Town to South America. She was empty, riding high in the water. Just after 9 in the morning, a squall of rain lifted, and suddenly, 2 ships appeared out of the mist. They were German. One was the Steyr, a commerce raider. These were terrifying vessels. They looked like innocent merchant ships, but behind hidden panels, they carried heavy 6-inch naval guns and torpedo tubes. They were wolves designed to look like sheep. The other was a supply ship, the Tannenfels. The Stephen Hopkins was trapped. The German raider was faster, more heavily armored, and had 6 times the firepower. The German commander signaled for the American ship to surrender. Captain Paul Buck looked at the enemy. He looked at his crew, and he gave a different order. Clear for action. The Hopkins had one small 4-inch gun mounted on the stern, a weapon designed to scare off a submarine, not fight a warship. It was manned by a handful of Navy volunteers led by Ensign Kenneth Willett. They didn't run. They turned the ship so their gun could bear, and they opened fire. What followed was one of the most brutal naval engagements of the war, and it was fought at point-blank range. The Steyr unleashed hell. Its heavy shells tore through the thin steel hull of the Liberty ship. The Hopkins caught fire from bow to stern. The bridge was destroyed. Captain Buck was mortally wounded, but the Americans kept firing. Ensign Willett, covered in blood, kept his gun crew firing round after round. They pumped 35 shells into the German raider. They targeted the waterline. They targeted the rudder. They targeted the engine room. One by one, the American gunners were killed. When the ammunition ran out, the survivors were firing machine guns at the German sailors on the deck. Finally, the Stephen Hopkins succumbed. She slipped beneath the waves, taking Captain Buck and Ensign Willett with her. But as the survivors clung to a lifeboat in the churning water, they saw something incredible. The Steyr was stopping. Smoke was pouring from her engines. She was listing. The helpless Liberty ship had gutted the German warship. An hour later, the Steyr exploded and sank. It was a draw. A slow, ugly cargo ship had traded its life for a heavy cruiser. This spirit, this refusal to just be a target, defined the merchant marine. And nowhere was that spirit tested more than on the Murmansk run. If the North Atlantic was a graveyard, the Arctic convoys to Russia were hell frozen over. After Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Stalin was desperate for supplies. The Allies agreed to send tanks, trucks, and fuel to the northern ports of Murmansk and Archangel. But to get there, the Liberty ships had to sail north of Norway into the Arctic Circle. In winter, the sun never rose. It was 24 hours of darkness. In summer, the sun never set. It was 24 hours of daylight, which meant the German bombers based in occupied Norway could hunt them around the clock. But the enemy wasn't just the Germans. It was the ice. The spray from the ocean would freeze the instant it hit the ship. Layer by layer, the ice would build up on the deck, the railings, the guns. If it got too thick, the weight would make the ship top-heavy. In rough seas, a Liberty ship could simply roll over and vanish. So, the crews had to go out onto the sliding, freezing decks in the middle of a gale. They tied ropes around their waists and hacked at the ice with axes and baseball bats. If you fell overboard, you didn't drown. You died of thermal shock in 60 seconds. One merchant mariner described the sound of a ship going down in a convoy. He said you could hear the boilers exploding underwater, a deep, thudding crump that vibrated through the hull of your own ship. Then, silence. You couldn't stop. You couldn't search for survivors. If you stopped, you were dead. So you kept steaming toward Russia, past the wreckage of your friends, hoping that the fog would hide you from the Luftwaffe bombers waiting for the clouds to break. This was the price of logistics. Every tank that fought at the Battle of Kursk, every truck that carried Soviet soldiers to Berlin had to be carried on a ship like this. And millions of tons of that equipment didn't come from established factories. It came from a place that, just 2 years earlier, had been a quiet field in Michigan. It came from Willow Run. Because while Kaiser was conquering the ocean, Henry Ford was trying to conquer the air. And he was finding out that building a bomber was a lot harder than building a car. Willow Run, Michigan, 1941. Henry Ford was an old man. He was stubborn, he was opinionated, and he hated the way aircraft were built. He looked at the aviation industry and saw a cottage industry. They were building planes the way shoemakers built shoes, one at a time, by hand, fitting each part to the next. If a piece of aluminum didn't fit, a mechanic would file it down until it did. To Ford, this was a sin. In his car factories, every part was identical. You didn't file parts, you made them perfect, so they snapped together. He declared that he could build the B-24 Liberator, a massive 4-engine heavy bomber on an assembly line. Just like a Model T, he promised the government he would build one bomber every hour. The aviation experts laughed at him. They pointed out that a car has about 15,000 parts. A B-24 Liberator has 450,000 parts. And unlike a car, which is made of heavy steel and doesn't mind a few millimeters of gap, a plane is made of lightweight aluminum. It has to be airtight. It has to withstand 300 miles per hour winds at 30,000 feet. If the tolerance is off by the thickness of a sheet of paper, the plane could disintegrate. But Ford was relentless. He built the largest room in the history of the world. The Willow Run factory was a mile long. It had an L shape. Legend says because Ford didn't want the building to cross into a county where the taxes were higher, although the reality was likely about fitting the airfield. He filled it with massive steel dies, hard tooling. In the aircraft world, they used soft tooling, flexible jigs that could be changed easily. Ford said no. He built massive, immovable steel casts for every wing rib and fuselage section. At first, it was a disaster. The aluminum sprang back when it was stamped. The parts didn't line up. The automotive methods seemed too brutal for the delicate aircraft skins. For months, the factory produced almost nothing. The critics called it "Will It Run?" But Ford's engineers, the cast iron Charlies, as the aircraft guys called them, kept tweaking. They froze the aluminum rivets to keep them soft. They redesigned the dies. And slowly, the machine started to work. The assembly line began to move. Raw materials went in one end. A fully formed 30-ton bomber rolled out the other. At its peak, Willow Run wasn't just hitting Ford's promise, it was beating it. They were producing one B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. Think about that. In the time it takes to eat lunch, American workers built a heavy bomber. By 1944, the United States was producing more aircraft than Germany and Japan combined. In fact, the US built more planes in a single year than Japan built in the entire war. This was the arsenal of democracy that Roosevelt had promised. It wasn't just ships, it was planes, it was tanks, it was trucks. But all of this production, the thousands of bombers from Willow Run, the tanks from Detroit, the crates of ammunition from Ohio, faced a bottleneck: the ocean. You can build 1,000 tanks in Detroit, but they are useless if they are sitting on a dock in New Jersey. They have to get to England. And England was becoming the most crowded island on Earth. By late 1943, the United Kingdom was effectively a giant floating aircraft carrier and supply depot. There were millions of American soldiers. There were mountains of supplies. The Liberty ships and Victory ships were arriving in such numbers that the British ports couldn't handle them. The bridge of steel was complete. The U-boats were defeated. The supplies were safe. But now, the Allies faced a new logistical nightmare. They didn't just need to get supplies to England, they needed to get them out of England. They needed to move this massive army across the English Channel and land it in Fortress Europe. They needed D-Day, and D-Day was fundamentally a shipping problem. You had to land 150,000 men and 10,000 vehicles on a hostile beach in a single day. But ships need ports. They need cranes. They need docks to unload. The Germans knew this. That's why they turned every major port in France, Cherbourg, Le Havre, Calais, into a fortress. They knew the Allies couldn't land on a beach because they couldn't supply an army from a beach. A Liberty ship draws 28 feet of water. It can't just drive up on the sand. It has to anchor miles offshore. If you can't capture a port, the invasion fails. The army runs out of ammo in 3 days and is pushed back into the sea. So the Allied planners came up with a solution that was so audacious, the Germans never saw it coming. If we can't capture a port, we will bring one with us. The plan was called Mulberry. It was one of the most tightly guarded secrets of the war. The concept was to build two massive artificial harbors in England, tow them across the Channel, and assemble them off the coast of Normandy. These weren't just docks. They were engineering monsters. They consisted of huge concrete caissons called phoenixes. Each one was 6 stories tall and as long as a football field. They were hollow, so they could float. Once they reached France, engineers would open valves, flood them with water, and sink them in a line to create a breakwater, a wall against the waves. Inside this calm water, they would install floating roadways, miles of steel bridges that floated on pontoons. These roadways would connect the deep water piers to the beach. It meant that Liberty ships could unload trucks and tanks directly onto a road miles out at sea, and the vehicles could drive themselves onto the beach. It was an engineering project the size of the Hoover Dam, but it had to float. And it had to be built in secret. They built the components in shipyards and dry docks all over Britain. The workers didn't know what they were building. They were told they were building flood defenses, or barges. On June 6, 1944, the invasion began. While the soldiers were fighting on Omaha and Utah beaches, a strange armada was crossing the channel behind them. Tugboats were dragging these massive concrete blocks at 3 miles per hour. Within days of the landing, the Mulberries began to take shape. It was a miracle of logistics. Suddenly, there were 2 fully functioning ports on the French coast. Mulberry A at Omaha Beach for the Americans, and Mulberry B at Gold Beach for the British. Ships could unload 24 hours a day, regardless of the tide. But nature gets a vote. On June 19th, just 2 weeks after D-Day, the worst storm in 40 years hit the English Channel. For 3 days, gale-force winds pounded the artificial harbors. The waves were higher than the concrete walls. The American harbor, Mulberry A, was destroyed. The steel roadways twisted like pretzels. The concrete caissons cracked and sank into the sand. It was a disaster, but Mulberry B, the British harbor, survived. It had been anchored differently, into rock rather than sand. And despite the loss of one harbor, the flow of supplies didn't stop. The Americans improvised. They used the wreckage of Mulberry A to reinforce the breakwater and landed supplies directly on the beach using LSTs, landing ship, tank. The Liberty ships kept coming. They brought the fuel that powered Patton's tanks. They brought the millions of artillery shells that leveled German defenses. They brought the Spam and the cigarettes and the dry socks. But as the Allied armies broke out of Normandy and raced across France, a new problem emerged. They were moving too fast. A modern army is a beast that eats fuel. A single armored division consumes thousands of gallons of gasoline every day. As Patton's Third Army raced toward Germany, his supply lines stretched thin. The pipelines from the coast couldn't keep up. The railroads were destroyed by Allied bombing. The only way to get fuel to the front was trucks. And so, the Red Ball Express was born. It was a continuously moving conveyor belt of trucks. 6,000 vehicles running 24 hours a day on a one-way loop from the beaches to the front line. The drivers were almost entirely African American soldiers. In a segregated army, they were barred from combat units, so they were put in the Transportation Corps. But make no mistake, this was combat. They drove at night, often without headlights to avoid German strafing. They drove exhausted. They drove trucks that were overloaded and falling apart. And the cargo they carried came from the holds of the Liberty ships. It was a continuous chain of steel. From the iron mines of Minnesota to the steel mills of Pittsburgh, to the shipyards of California, to the docks of England, to the beaches of France, to the gas tank of a Sherman tank in Belgium. If any link in that chain broke, the war stopped. But the chain didn't break, because Henry Kaiser and the American industrial machine had forged it too strong. By 1945, the end was in sight. The German army was collapsing. The U-boats were defeated. But across the world, in the Pacific, the war was very different. There were no roads in the Pacific. There were no railroads. There was only water. Millions of square miles of it. And to fight there, the Liberty ship had to evolve into something even stranger. It had to become a floating shopping mall. In Europe, the war was fought on land. In the Pacific, the war was fought against geography itself. The distances were mind-bending. San Francisco to Australia is 6,000 miles. Pearl Harbor to Tokyo is almost 4,000 miles. A task force leaving Pearl Harbor would burn its entire fuel supply before it was halfway to the battle. And unlike Europe, there were no friendly ports waiting. There were only coral atolls, tiny rings of sand in the middle of nowhere. No docks, no cranes, no warehouses, just palm trees and water. So, the Navy created something that had never existed before, a floating base. They called it Service Squadron 10. It was a secret armada that followed the combat fleet. It consisted of hundreds of ships, many of them converted Liberty and Victory hulls that served as a mobile city. When Admiral Nimitz wanted to attack an island, he didn't send the fleet back to Pearl Harbor to resupply. He moved the base to the fleet. The most famous of these anchorages was Ulithi Atoll. Before the war, Ulithi was a blank spot on the map, a lagoon in the Caroline Islands. By late 1944, it was the third largest naval base in the world, and every single part of it was floating. Imagine looking out at that lagoon. You would see 600 ships anchored in the calm water. You would see floating dry docks, massive structures that could submerge, scoop up a damaged battleship, and lift it out of the water for repairs. You would see floating factories, repair ships with machine shops, foundries, and optical labs inside their hulls. They could fix a radar set or cast a new propeller in the middle of the ocean. You would see hospital ships, ammunition ships, and tanker ships. But the Liberty ships were the backbone of this floating city. Some were converted into distilling ships. Their entire cargo hold was filled with massive boilers that turned seawater into fresh water for the fleet. Others were stores issue ships. Imagine a Walmart that floats. A destroyer would pull alongside, and a system of pulleys and lines, the High Line, would transfer crates across the water. They supplied everything: engine parts, toilet paper, light bulbs, movies, and ice cream. The United States Navy understood morale better than any military in history. They knew that a sailor in the tropics fighting a brutal war needed a taste of home. So they built a specialized concrete barge, costing $1 million, solely dedicated to making ice cream. It produced 500 gallons every shift. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. It was towed around the Pacific, dispensing morale to the fleet. The Japanese commanders couldn't believe it. They were starving. Their soldiers on the islands were eating roots and lizards because their supply ships had all been sunk by American submarines. And here were the Americans, with so much industrial capacity that they had a dedicated ice cream ship. It was a psychological weapon. It told the enemy, "We have more than you. We have so much more than you that we can waste tonnage on dessert." This fleet train allowed the U.S. Navy to stay at sea forever. A carrier could fight a battle, pull back to Ulithi for 3 days, reload bombs, refuel, replace its pilots, get fresh ice cream, and go right back to the fight. The operational tempo was relentless. By 1945, this mobile industrial machine was closing in on Japan. The Bridge of Steel now stretched from the Golden Gate Bridge all the way to Okinawa. But as the war neared its end, the shipyards back home were slowing down. The frantic pace of 1943 was gone. The workers started to wonder, what happens when the war ends? What happens to the Rosie the Riveters? What happens to the African American workers who moved to Vanport? And what happens to the 2,700 Liberty ships we built? We can't just leave them in the ocean. As the atomic bombs fell and the peace treaties were signed, the United States found itself with the largest merchant fleet in the history of mankind, and absolutely no idea what to do with it. The guns fell silent. The factories at Willow Run stopped the assembly lines. The fires in the steel mills of Pittsburgh banked down. And in the harbors of New York, San Francisco, and Norfolk, the water was crowded with gray ships. For a few months, they had one final noble mission: Operation Magic Carpet. The Liberty ships were hastily converted. They welded bunks into the cargo holds, stacks of canvas hammocks 5 high. They weren't comfortable. They smelled of oil and sweat. But the soldiers didn't care. They were going home. Millions of GIs rode these ugly ducklings back to the country that had built them. But once the soldiers were home, the ships were empty. The United States government faced a problem. It owned thousands of merchant ships. It was the largest shipping company the world had ever seen. But a democracy isn't supposed to run a state-owned shipping monopoly, and keeping them active cost a fortune in fuel and crew wages. So they decided to put them to sleep. They created the National Defense Reserve Fleet. They chose quiet, sheltered anchorages: Suisun Bay in California, the James River in Virginia, Beaumont, Texas. The ships were stripped of their guns. The ammunition was offloaded. Then came the mothballing crews. They drained the water from the pipes. They pumped gallons of preservative oil into the engines. They sealed the hatches and vents with heavy plastic cocoons to keep the moisture out. They towed the ships into long rows, tied them gunwale to gunwale, and dropped the anchors. It was a ghost fleet. Miles of silent gray hulls, rusting quietly in the sun. For the next 30 years they sat there. Occasionally, they would be woken up. When the Korean War started in 1950, hundreds of Victory ships were reactivated. The seals were broken, the boilers lit, and within weeks they were carrying supplies to Incheon. They were woken up again for Vietnam. But for the most part, they just waited. They became part of the landscape. Drivers crossing the Benicia Bridge in California would look down and see the mothball fleet, a physical reminder of the industrial effort of 1943. But the government couldn't keep them all. There were simply too many. So, Washington decided to hold the garage sale of the century. They passed the Merchant Ship Sales Act of 1946. The deal was simple. You could buy a Liberty ship, a vessel that cost $2 million to build, for a fraction of the price, sometimes as low as $500,000. It was a fire sale, but the established American shipping companies were hesitant. They still looked down on the Liberty ship. They thought it was slow. They thought the welded hulls were dangerous. They wanted modern, custom-built liners. They turned their noses up at the surplus. But there was a group of businessmen who didn't care about aesthetics. They didn't care about speed. They cared about leverage. They were Greek. Aristotle Onassis, Stavros Niarchos, the Golden Greeks. They looked at the Liberty ship, and they didn't see an ugly duckling. They saw a money-printing machine. The world was destroyed. Europe was rubble. Japan was ashes. Rebuilding the world would require moving billions of tons of concrete, steel, and grain. And the only ships available to move it were these cheap, surplus American war horses. Onassis realized that if he bought these ships for pennies on the dollar, he could undercut every other shipping company on Earth. He bought them by the dozen. He didn't care that they were slow. He didn't care that the accommodations were cramped. He painted over the gray camouflage with commercial colors and sent them back to work. This gamble changed the global economy forever. It was the birth of the modern shipping industry. The flags of convenience, the massive global trade networks, the billionaire shipping tycoons. It all started with the surplus Liberty ships. For 20 years after the war, if you saw a cargo ship in a port in Africa or South America or Asia, chances are it was a Liberty ship. It was no longer carrying tanks to fight Nazis. It was carrying tractors to rebuild France, or wheat to feed India. The ship that had saved civilization in war was now rebuilding it in peace. But there was one final chapter in the story, a legacy that Henry Kaiser never intended, but one that touches every single person listening to this today. Because in the frantic search for efficiency, in the desperate need to load ships faster, the American military had accidentally invented the modern world. To understand this invention, you have to look inside the hold of a Liberty ship. In 1944, loading a ship was a chaotic, back-breaking nightmare. It was called break-bulk shipping. Thousands of longshoremen swarmed over the docks. They moved coffee sacks by hand. They rolled barrels of oil. They lifted wooden crates of ammunition using nets and winches. It was slow, it was dangerous, and it was incredibly inefficient. A ship would spend as much time sitting at the dock being loaded as it did sailing across the ocean. Watching this chaos in the 1930s and 40s was a young trucking owner named Malcolm McLean. He sat in his truck at the docks in New Jersey, waiting for hours while men manually moved boxes from his trailer to the ship. He thought, "This is insane. Why are we taking the goods out of the truck to put them into the ship? Why don't we just pick up the whole truck trailer and put that on the ship?" The war accelerated this thinking. The military began using small, standardized steel boxes, the Conex box, to speed up supplies to the front. It was the grandfather of the modern shipping container. After the war, McLean bought a fleet of surplus tankers, very similar to the Liberty ships, and converted them to carry these metal boxes. In 1956, the SS Ideal X, a converted World War II tanker, sailed from Newark to Houston carrying 58 containers. It was the death knell of the Liberty ship era and the birth of the modern world. Today, we don't measure ships in tons. We measure them in TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units, the descendants of that military Conex box. The bridge of steel that Kaiser built across the Atlantic had evolved into a global conveyor belt of commerce. But while the technology evolved, the human legacy of the shipyards was more complicated. And in one specific place, it ended in tragedy. Remember Vanport, Oregon? The city Henry Kaiser built in a swamp to house his workers. When the war ended, the shipyards closed. But the people didn't leave. The African American workers who had moved from the South stayed. They had nowhere else to go. Portland was still largely segregated, and redlining laws prevented them from buying homes in white neighborhoods. So, Vanport remained. It became the largest public housing project in America. A city of 40,000 people, living in temporary wooden barracks that were never meant to last more than 5 years. They were living on borrowed time. Vanport was built on a floodplain between the Columbia River and the Oregon Slough. It was protected by a system of dikes. On Memorial Day 1948, 3 years after the victory they had helped build, the Columbia River began to rise. The spring snowmelt was heavy. The river was swollen. At 4:17 p.m. on Sunday, May 30th, the railroad embankment holding back the water collapsed. It wasn't a leak. It was a wall of water 10 feet high. The warning sirens didn't sound until the water was already in the streets. It was a scene of absolute terror. Wooden apartment buildings were ripped off their foundations and floated away like boats. Cars rolled over and sank. Parents grabbed their children and ran for the high ground. In less than an hour, the entire city of Vanport, the city that had built the ships that won the war, was gone, wiped off the map. 15 people died. Tens of thousands lost everything they owned. The city was never rebuilt. Today, if you go to North Portland, there is a golf course and a racetrack where the shipyard workers once lived. It is a somber reminder of the disposable nature of the war effort. We built disposable ships, we built disposable cities, and sometimes we treated the workers as disposable too. But the social impact of the shipyards couldn't be washed away by a flood. The women who had tasted financial independence as Rosie the Riveters were told to go back to the kitchen. Many did, but they never forgot the feeling of earning a union wage. Their daughters would lead the feminist movement of the 1960s. The African American workers who lost their homes in Vanport moved into Portland. They changed the demographic of the West Coast forever. The civil rights movement in the West was born in the ashes and the mud of the shipyard cities. So what is the final verdict on the Liberty ship? Technically, it was mediocre. It was slow. It was ugly. It was prone to cracking. But strategically, it was the greatest weapon of the Second World War. Not the atomic bomb, not the Sherman tank, not the P-51 Mustang, the Liberty ship, because the Liberty ship proved a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about logistics, but geniuses talk about throughput. Throughput, that is the word that killed the Third Reich. Henry Kaiser proved that in a modern total war, the quality of your individual weapon matters far less than the quantity of weapons you can deliver to the battlefield. The Germans never understood this. Until the very end, German engineering remained obsessed with the concept of the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapon. They built the first jet fighter, the Me-262. It was faster than anything the Allies had, a masterpiece of aerodynamics. They built the V-2 rocket, the first ballistic missile to touch the edge of space, a technological marvel that was decades ahead of its time. They built the Tiger II tank, 70 tons of precision machined steel that was virtually invincible in a head-to-head fight. But they built the Tiger tank like a Swiss watch. They machined the parts to microscopic tolerances. They constantly tweaked the design. They treated every tank as an individual work of art, and because of that, they could only build a few hundred of them. The Americans looked at war differently. They didn't want to build a watch, they wanted to build a sledgehammer. The Liberty ship was a sledgehammer. It was crude. The steel was rough. The engines were obsolete before they were installed. The welding looked like toothpaste squeezed out of a tube, but there were 2,700 of them. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, wrote about this in his memoirs. He described the moment he realized Germany was doomed. It wasn't a defeat on the battlefield. It was a report on American production. When he saw the numbers coming out of the Kaiser shipyards and the Willow Run bomber plant, he realized that Germany was fighting a mathematical impossibility. He wrote, "The war was decided by the steamroller of American industrial capacity. It didn't matter how brave the German soldier was. It didn't matter how brilliant the German scientist was. If you shoot down one bomber and the enemy builds 2 more, you lose. If you sink one ship and the enemy launches 3 more, you lose." The Liberty ship was the physical embodiment of this philosophy. It was the triumph of the good enough over the perfect. And it proved that in the 20th century, the factory floor was just as important as the front line. But these ships were more than just statistics. They were homes. For the merchant mariners who sailed them, the Liberty ship was a tiny floating steel world. It smelled of bunker oil, stale coffee, and welding flux. It vibrated constantly with the thumping of the steam piston. The crew quarters were cramped. In the tropics, the steel hull turned into an oven, baking the men inside. In the Arctic, the condensation froze on the interior walls, turning the bunks into ice caves. But for the men who lived on them, the ugly duckling was beautiful. Why? Because she was a survivor. Despite the brittle steel, despite the slow speed, the Liberty ship was incredibly tough. There are stories of Liberty ships taking 2 torpedo hits and refusing to sink. Their cargo of timber or empty oil drums kept them afloat. There are stories of Liberty ships being blown in half by mines, and the crew simply welding the bulkheads shut and towing the 2 halves back to port to be stitched back together. They were the cockroaches of the ocean. You couldn't kill them. And because they survived, they developed a personality. The crews gave them nicknames. They painted pinup girls on the smokestacks. They adopted stray dogs and cats as mascots. One ship, the SS Peter Sylvester, was torpedoed in the Indian Ocean. The survivors spent 32 days in a lifeboat. Their mascot, a dog named Meatball, survived with them, sharing their rations. When they were finally rescued, Meatball was given a citation for morale. These human stories of boredom, terror, and survival are baked into the steel of the few ships that remain, and today there are very few left. Of the 2,710 Liberty ships built, only 2 are still fully operational. One is the SS John W. Brown in Baltimore. The other is the SS Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco, and the story of the Jeremiah O'Brien is the perfect ending to this saga. Because 50 years after she was built, she decided to go back to war. In 1979, the Jeremiah O'Brien was just another rusting hull in the mothball fleet. She was covered in bird droppings. Her paint was peeling. She was scheduled to be scrapped, but a group of old sailors refused to let that happen. They were men who had sailed these ships in the war. Now they were in their 60s and 70s. They were retired, but they remembered. They bought the ship. They scraped the rust. They greased the winches. They crawled inside the boilers and chipped away 30 years of scale. And against all odds, they got the steam engine running again. For years, she was a museum piece docked in San Francisco, a floating curiosity. But in 1994, the 50th anniversary of D-Day was approaching. The world was preparing a massive celebration. The President of the United States, Bill Clinton, would be there. The Queen of England would be there. The modern navies of the world were sending their sleek nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and guided missile destroyers. The crew of the Jeremiah O'Brien looked at each other and said, "We should be there too." The Coast Guard thought they were crazy. They wanted to take a 50-year-old ship, a ship built in 56 days by people who had never built ships before, a ship designed to last only 5 years, and sail it halfway around the world. Through the Panama Canal, across the Atlantic, back to the beaches of Normandy. The crew was entirely volunteer. The average age was 70. The oldest member was a cadet from 1943. But they fired up the boilers. They loaded the ship with fresh water and food, and they cast off the lines. The voyage of the Jeremiah O'Brien in 1994 was a ghost story come to life. As she steamed down the coast of California, people came out to watch. When she passed through the Panama Canal, the lock workers stopped to salute. When she crossed the Atlantic, she hit the same rough seas that had broken her sister ships in half 50 years earlier. But the welds held. The rivets held. The ugly duckling kept plowing through the waves at 11 knots. When she arrived off the coast of France on June 6, 1994, the scene was surreal. The ocean was filled with the most advanced warships in human history. Radar dishes spinning, jets screaming overhead, and there, in the middle of this high-tech armada, was a gray, rusty, smoke-belching rectangle from 1943. She was the only ship present that had actually been part of the original D-Day invasion fleet. She was the only survivor who had returned to the scene of the crime. When the modern warships saw her, they didn't ignore her. They rendered honors. Destroyers dipped their flags. Sailors lined the rails in their dress whites to salute the old merchant mariners on the deck of the Liberty ship. The President of the United States came aboard, but the most poignant moment happened when the Jeremiah O'Brien steamed past the bluffs of Pointe du Hoc. 50 years earlier, Army Rangers had climbed those cliffs under heavy fire. Now, the veterans were standing on the beach. They looked out to sea, and they saw a silhouette they hadn't seen in half a century. The blunt bow, the upright smokestack, the cargo booms. For a moment, it was 1944 again. The bridge of steel had held. The Jeremiah O'Brien returned to San Francisco under her own power. She is still there today. You can go visit her. You can walk her decks. You can smell the oil. She is a living monument. Not to a general, not to an admiral, not to a politician. She is a monument to the welder from Kansas, to the riveter from the Bronx, to the housewife from Oregon who put on a pair of coveralls and saved the world. She is a monument to the idea that when a democracy is pushed to the brink, it can wake up and do the impossible. But the story of the Liberty ship leaves us with one final uncomfortable question. Could we do it again? In 1941, the United States was the arsenal of democracy. We made everything. We made the steel. We made the engines. We made the shoes. We mined the coal. Today, the shipyards of Richmond, California, are empty. The slipways are rotting wood. Willow Run is no longer building bombers. The steel mills of Pittsburgh are largely quiet. The United States is still a superpower, but our economy has changed. We have moved from manufacturing to information, from steel to silicon. If a major war broke out tomorrow, a war of attrition, a war where we lost ships by the dozen, could we replace them? Could we build a Liberty ship in 4 days? Could we find a Henry Kaiser? Could we find 300,000 people willing to move to a mudflat and weld steel for 12 hours a day? The answer is maybe. But it would look very different. Today, we don't build ships in 4 days. But we don't need to. The logic of logistics has evolved. In 1943, logistics was about mass. It was about blunt force. It was about drowning the enemy in steel. Today, logistics is about precision. It is about the just-in-time supply chain. It is about putting a single guided missile on a single target rather than carpet bombing an entire city. But the lesson of the Liberty ship remains the most important lesson of the 20th century. It taught us that there is a beauty in utility. We often fetishize the elite. We love the ace pilot. We love the special forces operator. We love the genius inventor working alone in a garage. But the Liberty ship proves that history is often made by the ordinary. It was built by ordinary people. It was sailed by ordinary people. It was, by design, an ordinary ship. But when you take the ordinary and multiply it by 2,710, it becomes extraordinary. It becomes a force of nature. The men and women of the 1940s didn't set out to change the world. They just wanted to do a job. The welder in Richmond just wanted to finish her seam so she could go pick up her kids. The sailor on the Murmansk run just wanted to get his cargo to Russia so he could get warm. Henry Kaiser just wanted to pour concrete and steel faster than anyone else. But together, They built a bridge of steel that spanned the most dangerous ocean on Earth. And across that bridge marched the armies of liberation. So the next time you see a rusty old cargo ship chugging slowly out of a harbor, don't look away. Don't dismiss it as ugly. Don't dismiss it as boring. Look at it with respect, because that is what victory looks like.